Hi, I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. I'm here today with Laura Diener, Chief Information Security Officer at Northwestern Mutual, named one of the world's most admired companies in its industry, according to Fortune magazine's annual survey published in 2022. To learn more about Northwestern Mutual, visit northwesternmutual.com. This interview is sponsored by KnowBe4, the world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform that helps you manage the ongoing problem of social engineering. To learn more about KnowBe4, visit knowbe4.com. Laura, welcome. Great to have you back with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, Laura, you've followed us. We've followed you. You know our material. We recently published the top 5 cybersecurity facts, figures, predictions, and statistics for a 5-year period running through 2025. A lot of this material shows up in the boardroom. We try to put it out there so that there are some talking points CEOs can actually understand, and it's helpful to the rest of the community. So we want to get your take on this. But before we do, tell us about yourself and your position at Northwestern Mutual.
Yeah, sure. So I always love doing these with you guys. You're awesome. I read your articles. Of course, the top 5 is like, that hot thing that comes out every year. So really appreciate you. So I want to start off by saying that. My role at Northwestern Mutual, this is my third Chief Information Security Officer role. What I'm responsible for, of course, is setting the strategy for cybersecurity. But here's something that's interesting. At Northwestern Mutual, I also get to do it for IT risk management.
Hmm.
Some people will call that the second line of defense. So I get to do both, and it's been pretty amazing. Northwestern Mutual is a financial services company. We provide end-to-end financial services, not just life insurance. So it's a nice way for me to continue down the path of financial services because that's where I grew up, and it's been an amazing journey. Been here 18 months.
So for anybody else at Northwestern Mutual who's watching, Laura's doing 2
Mhm.
jobs there. So keep that in mind. And I'm
To be
serious.
fair,
We
my
don't
my
have a lot of
team is doing
CISOs
the job. My team is doing it.
overseeing. Okay. So, Laura,
There
for
we
the
go.
first statistic, let's jump in here. If it was measured as a country, cybercrime, which is predicted to inflict damages totaling $7 trillion US dollars, that is, globally, this year, 2022, it would be the world's third largest economy after the US and China. We expect this is going to continue growing 15% year over year over the next 5 years. Are these inflated figures? And, we don't take any offense. People are just trying to size this, get an idea. Is cybercrime really causing that much damage? Or is it being hyped, not intentionally, but, just more than what it really is?
Yeah, I mean, they might feel inflated, but this is my personal opinion. I don't feel that they are. I actually really appreciate all of the research that you all do and making sure that we have some good data figures. I mean, not just because I'm so analytical, but because I appreciate that analysis that you all are doing. Again, my personal experience living through several is that I do think that cybercrime especially, but handling an incident means that you have to do a lot, right? Let's just take ransomware as an example, and I know we're going to get into it a little bit later. Those things happen very quickly, and there's a lot to recover from. There is a lot of remediation cost that goes along with it. And so those numbers, while we can nitpick on what is cyber related, right? We can start talking about how much is it actually cyber versus how much is it hygiene, which I like to say. But at the end of the day, when you actually go through a real cyber incident, you are spending a phenomenal amount of time, resources, and definitely money. So it doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't.
So, in response to cybercrime, we have a cybersecurity market. It's a big ecosystem. There's a lot of companies, a lot of cyber fighters out there. We've been tracking this for a long time. If you go back to 2004, our market was about a $3.5 billion industry. And now it's one of the fastest growing for the 5-year period from 2017 to 2021. We were looking at about $1 trillion being spent on cybersecurity, and looking ahead for the next 5 years, we're going to continue with that 15% year over year pattern. My question isn't so much, are we spending a lot of money on cyber? We know that we are, and we track the investments going into cyber companies, but are we spending it in the right areas? That's really the big question.
It is a big question, and I think it really just depends on the individual, defenders, the people who are cybersecurity evangelists that are on that front line. It depends on their own situation. I think that the reason why we're seeing such a inflated market, if I can say, in terms of cybersecurity market, is because some people are catching up. Frankly,
Hmm.
there's a tool for everything. I think if you've looked at all of the tool sets that are out there, it feels like there's a tool for everything. But what I would caution people to do, regardless of their role, is to really think about a strategy. You need a solid strategy that includes people, process, and technology. Not just buy a tool, think that it's going to solve all your problems. You have to invest in your people, I think, first, and then start thinking about some good efficiencies where perhaps a tool is great, but we could also do some automation because we all know how to do scripts.
Right.
So really just thinking about that strategy is important, and including not just a technology where you're purchasing things, but also the people. Yes, I know people are resources, but if you balance it out, I think you'll spend a lot less on cybersecurity. And again, it really depends on the individual situations.
So, bad news, good news as it relates to employment in our field. Cyber fighters, do we have enough of them? We know we don't. We've been working hard at that. I think that universities have done a great job across the country. Tech giants have stepped in. There's a lot of new programs to stimulate getting more young people involved, getting more women involved in the field. You and I have talked about this. Still, we have a big deficit. If we had to put a number on it, 3.5 million open positions globally. To give people a visual, that's enough to fill 50 NFL stadiums. The good news is, for the first time looking ahead, we're projecting that number is going to flatline. So we're not seeing the same type of growth, the same deficit year over year. We have a big job. We need to fill the positions, but it does feel like we're starting to turn the corner. We're seeing a better pipeline coming out of universities. I'm curious, what are you seeing? Is it starting to get any better? And in the meantime, what do we do?
Yeah, I'm looking for that solstice. Believe me, I am. You and I have talked a lot about this, especially, with my passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think if you think about your approach to hiring, developing, and acquiring talent in that way, right? You hiring talent, you develop talent that's already there, and if you're really thinking outside the box, so to speak, you may find amazing talent that you're looking for, right? And so hire for like capability and capacity to learn. Don't hire for a resume that has a page long list of requirements that maybe you want them to have. Right. So focus on workforce plans, right? So depending on how large a team is, you may want to think about, okay, I have some solid leaders. Now let me start thinking about a pipeline to your point. And if you're thinking about that pipeline, think about some great programs like Cyversity, whose mission is to achieve the consistent representation of women and underrepresented minorities in the cybersecurity industry. And they have tons of programs to help with that. So I really recommend checking them out, but also think about acquiring talent and spending good time reading your job description for that page long list of requirements, but also think about what you're presenting yourself with that job description, right? If you have a talent acquisition team, they can definitely help refine the job description, but also look at it in a lens that maybe you're using some biased words, right? And you really are swaying away some particular talent that has that passion, that grit, that capacity to learn. And so my recommendation, yes, we are all as CISOs, of course, struggling to find those people, but think about it in a way that is going to help you develop strong talent for capability and capacity. Passion and grit, and then develop them over time and ensure that you're thinking about your whole workforce plan and your talent pipeline.
So I want to mention something here. We don't have time really to talk about it too much. If I opened it up, I think we'd probably go for an hour or so now. But for people who are
Probably.
watching, Laura is one of 85 people. That would be one of 85 women who are chief information security officers in the Fortune 500. So you do the math on that number, and it's about half of the representation of women in cyber overall. So we have a lot of work to do in the CISO position. I remember there was a time, Laura, when you weren't previously a CISO, but you were hired and you did an amazing job. Now it's different. You're an established CISO. You've been doing it for years. But, employers need to, look at filling those positions for the first time with some really capable people.
Definitely. Give people a chance.
Yeah. So let's shift gears. You touched on ransomware. I'm going to build on it. Last year, global damages were $20 billion. That's up from $325 million in 2015, when I would talk about ransomware and people would ask, what exactly is that? They didn't completely understand. Now this has evolved and we have extortion, double extortion. The ransomware market is growing so quickly. It's a huge concern. And we're not seeing it go away. We're seeing it continue to grow. In your opinion, Laura, you have so much on your plate. CISOs do, everything from training employees to dealing with, endpoints, and it goes on and on and on. Where does ransomware fit in? How much attention does that grab of the CISO's mind?
Oh gosh, I mean, every CISO should be thinking a lot about ransomware, just for the reasons that you just talked about. I mean, it's extremely lucrative, and cyber criminals are criminals, and they want to make money. So you really have to spend time, and of course, it is very, very stressful having gone through a ransomware attack. It happens very quickly. It's designed to be that way so that you pay, right? And so again, different companies, different things going on. So it really just depends. But for anybody who's followed the MITRE ATT&CK framework, this it's very helpful in understanding like how a ransomware attack actually happens. I don't think anybody's surprised that people are still our weakest link. So I know we're going to talk about security awareness,
Right.
um, but no surprise there. So you definitely have to focus on training the masses, everyone, not just training the technologists, but training everybody at a company about what to look for. And then, of course, observations, looking for suspicious domain registrations, monitoring the dark web, chasing down those things, looking at initial infection vectors, right? You should have some solutions on the endpoint to look for certain things. You should have some anti-phishing controls put in place, but you have to continuously update that, stay very, very vigilant. The entire team needs to. And then of course thinking about like how this malware might get a foothold, you really want to think about looking for something that would look like a tactic or a technique or a protocol, look like some kind of indicator for you. Like, for instance, connecting out. If there's something that's connecting out, then your team has to investigate that and at least run it to the ground so that you're sure it's not a foothold, right? Because once the foothold happens, it really goes very quickly. And of course, there's lots of different techniques to use at the end of this whole thing, which is hopefully you never get to, which is the extortion aspect of it. I think what's most important there is having an incident response plan that you test constantly and you test with real world scenarios like, okay, we're in the middle of a ransomware attack. Like, how do we go through this? I think that is so important. And, my computer scientist brain aside, like the communication channels that happen during that point have to be solid.
Right.
You should not spend time arguing with each other once you're at that point. So you really want to focus on a rinse repeat. Let's get better. Get better each and every time we go through a simulation. So all of those things are really important. Of course, you got to patch your systems. I mean, a lot of the exploits that I see are still exploiting either if it's a 0 day, you definitely have to patch quickly as fast as possible if it's critical, of course. And then if it's old vulnerabilities, you should probably think about your hygiene a little bit better. So that's in a nutshell some of the things I think have worked. Of course, every situation is different. We will see ransomware evolve again because it's very lucrative. So you have to stay vigilant. You have to stay up to date and always looking.
So you're a large enterprise, your peers probably, I hope, get the big picture, and you have teams, you have, response plans. Do you worry at all when you read about this and you think about mid-size or even especially small companies
Oh yeah.
where they don't have a CISO, they don't have a CIO, they, barely have an IT staff, let alone cybersecurity expertise, And we're seeing more than 50% of ransomware attacks striking small businesses.
Yeah, I do worry a lot about small and medium-sized businesses. When I was part of the World Economic Forum, we actually talked a lot about that and some of the things that we can do. I do think that there's a spot for investors, right, to start thinking about how they can help a small or medium-sized business, not kind of hold their feet to the fire on a standard that they would expect at a big company, but, hold their feet to the fire on just some of those basics and where they perhaps that company, that small or medium sized business doesn't have it, offer up some good connections at other companies that are much larger that actually do cybersecurity for a living
Right.
to see if there is a way that this small or medium-sized business can utilize some of their services. That's kind of like, a CISO in a box, for instance.
Right.
Some of those services at a rate that is reasonable for a small company. It should be a product of their revenue, not the product of how much the company wants to make off of them.
Now, for all companies, Laura, if you could try to, just frame this so that, it's relevant to small businesses, mid-sized, large enterprises, humans, people, employees, how important is it for them to understand, the basics of cybersecurity and to be part of a program so that they could help, detect and respond to some of these threats?
Oh, super important. Super, super important. I don't think that they need to go get a degree in cybersecurity. I think that they just need to understand that they are actually important, that the attackers do want to attack them. And to be skeptical, to look out for things such as the phishing that we just talked about. If it's phishing that they're using to come after you, that means that they have already done some reconnaissance on who you are, what you do at the company, why you're important, even if you don't think you are, just compliment yourself, you're important. Um, and then think about, you might act a certain way at your business or your company, but those security tenants that are held there, you can take those home, right? You don't, even with your personal email, you don't have to click a link. You could still be skeptical. You still should keep your own, antivirus up to date. It's still relevant. and, and of course, you should ask questions of who is utilizing your data. I mean, nobody reads the EULA, nobody does, right? So you should still take a minute to say, why am I installing this app? I don't understand anything in here. It's asking to track. I don't feel comfortable. Say no. You don't need that many apps on your phone. Trust me.
Now, do you think we're in a better place to say, than we were 5 years ago? You talk to a lot of people in your organization, outside of your organization. So when you think about, sales and marketing professionals, customer service, just people who hold all non-IT roles, do they get it? Are they more schooled on, these threats, more aware?
I feel like they are. I mean, sometimes it's their own, I guess, morbid curiosity. But sometimes I think all of the news has really, I mean, from like seriously, from the time that we started talking to the time now, like the amount of news articles that have come out about cybersecurity related breaches, it's gotten way better in terms of education, of information. I think even journalists have gotten more technical about how they're describing some of these things. So I do feel like it's got better.
Right.
Is there room for improvement? Of course there is. But I think all of us security types need to practice some empathy and utilize every moment to educate someone, regardless of what they do.
Right.
Right? Right? I'll educate the janitor, the person that takes a ticket when I'm parking my bike. I'll take an opportunity to talk about what they can do and what good tenants and hygiene they can bring to themselves when it comes to security.
Well, they need it. You and I are both from like the greater New York City area. I'm a Met fan. I don't know if you were a Mets or a Yankees fan or not a fan at all, but because I'm a Mets fan, we went to a Mets game, our media crew, last year. I think it was last year. And when we were at the event, we were roving around the baseball game and asking fans two questions. The first question was, do you know what phishing is? Almost all of them did. And a lot of them were very proud and they wanted to give us, these complete answers and tell us, what phishing was.
Nice.
Then we asked them the second question. Do you know what spear phishing is? Nobody knew. No surprise, BEC, business email
Yeah.
compromise, a lot of these, social engineering attacks that, target specific people in finance are rising. So are we taking that education to the next level and
Mhm.
starting to, train people on more than just the basics of, detecting, a URL they might not have
A
seen
fish.
before?
Yeah, I feel like we are. I feel like we do that in a role-based way, right? And I also think that the incentives have been a better way versus the consequences. So instead of you know, faulting someone for falling for the fish when you're doing your simulations, if you do them regularly, perhaps take a moment to utilize some additional education just in that moment. I think you'll get a lot more with honey than vinegar. um, for BEC, yeah, I mean, of course, most companies have a group of people that is highly targeted, whether it's the finance team, whether it's the team that handles the POs, whether it's the all the executives at the company, and so there is additional training you can provide to actually spot because it's not just about email anymore; it's about SMS, right? Because there's SMS phishing now.
Right.
And so, really focusing on what role certain people play and how they would be targeted, and then educating them on like you may actually, because of what you do, get a different type of fish. So let us educate you on what to spot in that situation.
Right.
And then of course you can monitor those folks, more often. You can put other types of processes or controls in place to try to prevent like the BEC fish specifically. I got to tell you, like I have conversations now and people know, oh yeah, it looks like it's coming from me, but, those headers, right? I mean, that's a big change from the first time I started talking about fish. People know that there's headers that exist in
Right.
email. so so that is a nice change. I think people are getting way more educated.
So before we let you go, Laura, I want to ask you
Mhm.
about one last topic. We just recently put out a report about boardroom cybersecurity, and my question for you has to do, getting back to Fortune 500, Global 2000, large enterprises. How important is it for the CISO to be either invited into the boardroom or somehow, connected to it, to the CEO? Are we getting any better with that? Because it's been a struggle for a very long time. We've been advocates, and we believe that every board should have somebody with cybersecurity experience if it's not the CISO.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I agree with you on that and everything that you've put out on that topic for sure. I think what I worry about though, if I could be a little controversial, is getting too involved. Because the CISO's job is pretty hard. I speak from experience, and having them at the table, very important. But once it crosses more into managing, and I think that that's where we need to be very focused on just making sure that there's the voice, that it's transparent, that CISO isn't being faulted for say something that's not green,
Right.
right? Because we're trying to be realistic. And then of course enabling and giving the support. That's super important. That's one of the reasons why that voice at the table is so important. Because if you realize that they have that difficult job, that they are doing what they're supposed to do, that there isn't like gross negligence going on here, right? Then you start to understand that there are things and sequencing and things that have to happen, and maybe a certain level of resources, and even enabling that CISO with some other contacts. So that's what's nice about someone on the board having some kind of security background, is you wind up getting connected to other people who perhaps could help in the journey depending on the situation of, the CISO and the strategy that they're setting.
Right. Well, Hydrix and Struggle, a top executive placement firm, put out a report recently, and out of 449 board placements out of the Fortune 500, so that's almost all of the Fortune 500, 17% had cybersecurity experience, and that was up from about 8% a couple of
Yeah, oh,
years
wow.
ago. So it's starting to trend up. I think we're
Yeah, it's
moving in
good.
the right direction. People have the awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, and,
Laura,
and if I could just say one more
sure.
thing on it, what's important is, that person on the board that has some of that security background, the rest of the board members trust that person usually, and and they have a governance job to do, right? And so they can't just blindly trust the CISO just because they have credentials to say so, right? So I think what's important is that if that person has a good background, in security, they hopefully understand how difficult it is, and that way can tailor the amount of questions to get that that agency that CISO needs, but also that trust. So having that trusted partners is really important. I've seen it work really well.
Laura, it was great having you on with us. We covered a lot of ground.
Yes,
We have a new report coming out on ransomware in the not too distant future. Maybe you'll come back on and talk to us about that.
Sure.
All right. Look forward to
Yeah,
it.
well, it was great to see you.
Thank you. I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. This interview is sponsored by KnowBe4, the world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform that helps you manage the ongoing problem of social engineering. To learn more about KnowBe4, visit knowbe4.com. You can keep up with all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.